No one suspected that behind the rusted gates of the old hangar, where Aidan Gray disappeared every evening, a plane was hidden. Silver Wind, a fighter jet he had pieced together fragment by fragment, as if breathing life back into his own soul. No one knew that Aidan had once been an ace pilot, whose maneuvers in the skies above the Caratel Mountains had saved an entire squadron. And no one imagined that his heart still clung to a promise made to his dying mentor. You will fly again, for truth, for those who cannot. Have you ever been underestimated? Share in the comments what drove you to prove your worth. Wind Hollow was a forgotten scrap of land where time seemed to stand still. Abandoned hangars, overgrown with weeds, and faded signs hinted at days when the airfield buzzed with life. But now silence reigned, broken only by the distant hum of trucks and the cries of crows. Aidan lived in a small house near the workshop, his only companion an old radio that caught snippets of news about far-off conflicts and government deals. One evening, as the sun sank into a crimson horizon and dust settled on the windows, a knock came at Aidan's workshop. The door creaked open with a piercing screech, and a man in a dark suit stepped inside. His face was stern, his eyes cold as steel. He introduced himself as Michael Crow, a representative of Nexus Aero, the corporation that controlled most aviation facilities in the region. Aidan Gray? His voice cut through the air like a knife. We need your help. Aidan, wiping his hands with a rag, gave the visitor a sidelong glance. His face remained impassive, but his heart quickened. Nexus Aero wasn't just a corporation, it was a force that held the skies, contracts, and secrets in its grip. They didn't come to someone like him without a reason. I'm just a mechanic, Aidan replied, his voice quiet but firm. How can I help? Crow tossed a folder onto the table. A seal marked confidential gleamed on the cover. We need a pilot, Crow said. One of our cargo planes crashed in the Caratel Mountains. There's equipment on board that can't be left behind. You know those mountains better than anyone. Aidan froze. Caratel, the place where he had lost everything. His mentor, his comrades, his faith in the system. The place where his name had become a legend. Then ashes. Why me? He asked, though the answer already hummed in his mind like an engine. Because you're the only one who can do it, Crow said, pausing, his gaze piercing Aidan. And because you know what happens if we don't recover that cargo. Aidan didn't respond. He knew Nexus Aero didn't ask. They commanded. But something in Crow's words smelled of deceit. Cargo, equipment, Caratel. Too many coincidences, too many shadows from the past. That night, after Crow left, Aidan opened the rusted hangar gates. Silver Wind stood in the half-light, its sleek lines glinting under the faint glow of a lantern. Aidan ran his hand along the fuselage, feeling the cold metal. He recalled the words of his mentor, Captain William Storm Reed. A plane isn't just a machine. It's your voice, your truth. Have you ever done something for others without seeking glory? Share your story in the comments. The next day, Aidan headed to Nexus Aero's headquarters, located just outside Wind Hollow. The building resembled a fortress, grey concrete walls surrounded by barbed wire with the hum of drones overhead. Inside, he was met by Laura Wilson, a young pilot whose eyes burned with ambition, but whose hands trembled with nerves. She was one of the few who treated Aidan with respect, though she didn't know his past. They say you were a pilot, she said, as they walked down a corridor. Why'd you quit? Aidan didn't answer. His thoughts drifted back to Caratel, to the day the sky burned, and William Reed's voice thundered through his headset. Hold your altitude, Aidan. You'll get them out. That flight had been his triumph, and his curse. He saved the squadron but lost his mentor. Then Nexus Aero accused him of negligence, burying the truth with the wreckage. Aidan walked away quietly, leaving behind medals and glory. In the briefing room, Crow revealed the details. The crash plane was carrying an experimental engine, a technology that could revolutionize aviation. But Caratel was treacherous. Storms, rocky gorges, and rumors of armed groups scavenging wreckage. Aiden's mission was to find the plane, retrieve the engine, and return, alive. "Why not send your own squadron?" Aiden asked, his voice calm but his eyes alight. Crow shrugged. "It's a delicate operation. We don't want to draw attention." Laura, standing nearby, leaned toward Aiden. "They're scared the truth will come out," she whispered. "That engine, it's not just technology, it's something bigger." A chill ran down Aiden's spine. He knew Nexus Aero didn't play fair. Their contracts reeked of corruption, their planes of blood, but he also knew he couldn't refuse. Not because of Crow, not because of the corporation, because of the promise he made to William. "I'll fly for the truth." That night, he returned to the hangar. Under the moonlight, Silver Wind looked like a ghost ready to come alive. Aiden checked every bolt, every wire, every detail. The plane was old but perfect. His creation, his secret. He started the engine, and its low hum shattered the silence like a heart beating anew. At dawn, Aiden and Laura set out for Karatal. Their plane, provided by Nexus Aero, was heavy and cumbersome, but Aiden knew how to make it sing. Laura sat beside him, her hands gripping the co-pilot's yoke tightly. "Can you really do this?" she asked as they flew over the desert. "We'll see," Aiden replied, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Karatal greeted them with a storm. Sand whirlwinds battered the fuselage, and thunder roared like artillery. Aiden held the yoke with cool confidence, his movements precise, almost instinctive. Laura watched him in awe, as if seeing who he truly was for the first time. "You've flown here before, haven't you?" she asked. "A long time ago," he replied, his voice drowned by the engine's roar. They found the cargo plane's wreckage in a deep gorge where rocks gleamed like knives and the wind howled as if mourning the dead. But something was off. The wreckage looked too clean. No signs of an explosion, no bodies, just the engine, tucked away in a metal container, standing alone as if someone had left it there. "It's a trap," Laura whispered, her voice trembling. Aiden nodded. He felt it, the cold premonition that always came before a fight. Then they saw them, 3 figures in dark masks, armed with rifles, approaching the wreckage. These weren't random scavengers. They were Nexus Aero's men. "They don't want us to take the engine," Aiden said, his voice calm but his eyes blazing. "They want us gone with it." Laura turned to him, her face pale. "What do we do?" Aiden smiled for the first time that day. "We fly." They barely reached the plane as bullets whistled past. Aiden shoved Laura into the cockpit and leapt to the controls. The engine roared, and the plane surged into the sky as a sandstorm swirled around them, a giant vortex. "They'll catch us," Laura shouted, as 2 enemy helicopters appeared on the horizon, their blades slicing the air with a deafening hum. "They won't," Aiden said. His hands moved with lightning speed, his eyes scanning the sky. He knew Karatal. Every canyon, every turn, every shadow. The plane dove into a narrow gorge where the rocks seemed close enough to tear the wings apart. Laura held her breath, but Aiden was calm, his movements precise as a surgeon's blade. He weaved through the rocks, making the plane dance to the storm's rhythm. One helicopter misjudged a turn and crashed into a cliff, erupting in a brilliant fireball. The second kept pursuing, but Aiden knew where he was going. He steered the plane toward the Needle, a narrow pass where only the best pilots could navigate. Laura screamed as the wings nearly grazed the rocks, but Aiden only smiled. "Hold on," he said. The plane burst out of the gorge, and the pursuing helicopter didn't make it. It got stuck, its blades shattering, debris raining down like a storm. When they landed at Wind Hollow's airfield, Laura stared at Aiden as if she'd seen a ghost. "Who are you?" she asked. "Just a mechanic," he replied, but his eyes shone. The next day, Crow appeared at the workshop. His face was grim, but respect flickered in his eyes. "You did it, Gray," he said. The engine's secure, but you knew there was more to it, didn't you? Aidan didn't answer. He knew. The engine wasn't just technology. It was the key to a network of spy satellites Nexus Aero used for surveillance, and Aidan had kept a copy of the data, evidence that could bring the corporation down. "I did what you asked," he said. "Now leave me be." Crow nodded and left, but before he vanished, he placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a letter from a general who had once served with William Reed. "You kept his promise, Aidan. He would be proud." Aidan stood in the hangar's silence, holding the letter. Silver Wind stood quietly beside him, its presence like the voice of his mentor echoing in his heart. Aidan hadn't come for glory. He had come for truth. Do you believe in those who act for others? Share if this story inspired you. The dust of Wind Hollow settled on the rusted gates of the hangar, but for Aidan Gray, the town's silence was no longer a refuge. The letter from the general, left by Michael Crow, burned in his pocket like a torch. The words, "he would be proud," echoed in his mind, but with them came memories of Caratel, of fire in the sky, of William Reed's voice commanding him to hold altitude. Aidan knew the truth he had stolen from Nexus Aero's engine was not an end, but a beginning. The data, hidden on his old laptop, held proof. The corporation used spy satellites, not just for defense, but for manipulation, surveillance of the innocent, and silencing those who dared to speak. Aidan stood before Silver Wind, his plane gleaming in the dim lantern light. He was ready. But this time, he couldn't act alone. Laura Wilson, the young pilot who had seen him in action, had become his unexpected ally. Her fiery eyes reminded him of his own youth when he still believed in justice. Have you ever fought for truth, knowing the cost might be too high? Share your story in the comments. The next morning, Wind Hollow awoke to a rumble. Black Nexus Aero SUVs surrounded Aidan's workshop, their headlights cutting through the fog like knives. Crow returned, this time with 6 armed men, their faces hidden behind masks. "You made a mistake, Gray." His voice was cold as steel. "The data you took belongs to us. Hand it over, and we'll forget this ever happened." Aidan stood in the workshop doorway, his hands steady, but his heart thrummed like an engine before takeoff. He knew surrender meant the end, not just for him, but for those named in the data. Journalists, activists, ordinary people who dared to challenge the corporation. "I didn't take anything," he said, his voice quiet, but its firmness made Crow pause. "You've got the wrong address." Crow smiled, but his eyes were lifeless. "We know you copied the data, and we know about your plane. Don't make us destroy everything you have." Aidan felt Laura, standing behind him, squeeze his hand. She whispered, "They're bluffing, but they won't back down." That night, Aidan and Laura devised a plan. The data had to reach someone who could use it. Nathan Clark, an independent journalist who had investigated Nexus Aero for years. But Clark was hiding in a city hundreds of kilometers away, in a zone the corporation kept off limits. The only way to reach him was to fly, and the only plane Aidan trusted was Silver Wind. The preparation took all night. Aidan and Laura worked in the hangar, checking every component of Silver Wind. The plane was old, but its engine hummed with a vitality that felt alive. Laura, who had once seen Aidan only as a mechanic, now looked at him with awe. "How do you do it?" she asked, as he calibrated the instruments with a watchmaker's precision. "It's like you're talking to the plane." Aidan smiled, his fingers buzzing with work. "It's not me. It's her. William taught me to listen. A plane will tell you what it needs if you know how to hear it." She nodded, but her eyes were full of questions. Why come back to this? You could have stayed in the shadows. Aidan paused, his gaze falling on a photo pinned to the hangar wall. Him and William Reed, young, smiling, in front of a fighter jet. "I made a promise," he said softly, "and I'm tired of hiding." At dawn, they were ready. Silver Wind stood on the runway, its silver wings glinting in the first rays of sunlight. But as they opened the hangar gates, the sky roared. Two Nexus Aero helicopters hovered over Wind Hollow, their spotlights blinding like a predator's eyes. "They knew," Laura whispered, her voice trembling. "They always knew," Aidan replied, "but they don't know us." He leapt into the cockpit, Laura right behind him. Silverwind's engine roared, and the plane surged forward as bullets whistled past. The runway was short, and the helicopters closed in. But Aidan didn't hesitate. His hands danced over the controls, his eyes scanning the sky. The plane lifted off just as a helicopter fired a missile, which exploded behind them, kicking up a cloud of dust. The flight to the city where Nathan Clark hid was a trial. The desert sky was restless, storms roared, and clouds shrouded the stars. Nexus Aero's helicopters stayed on their tail, their blades slicing the air with a relentless rhythm. Laura monitored the instruments, her voice calm but tense. "They're closing in," she shouted as one helicopter fired another missile. Aidan yanked the yoke, and Silverwind dove into a canyon where rocks gleamed like blades. The missile struck a cliff, erupting in a fireball. Laura held her breath, but Aidan only smiled. "Hold on," he said. "This isn't Caratel yet." He guided the plane into a maze of canyons where every turn was deadly. The helicopters tried to keep up, but Silverwind was faster, more agile, almost alive. Aidan maneuvered with superhuman precision. One helicopter misjudged a turn and crashed into a cliff, exploding in a brilliant flash. The second kept pursuing, but Aidan saw his chance. They burst from the canyon into open sky, where the storm raged with renewed fury. Lightning tore through the clouds, and thunder boomed like cannons. Aidan pointed the plane upward into the heart of the storm. Laura gripped the armrests, her eyes wide. "You're insane!" she shouted. "Maybe," he replied, his voice calm but his eyes blazing. "But I know what I'm doing." He used the storm as cover, weaving through lightning, forcing the helicopter to lose sight of them. When the sky finally cleared, the helicopter was gone. But Aidan knew it was only temporary. Nexus Aero wouldn't stop. The city where Nathan Clark hid appeared on the horizon, a grey labyrinth of abandoned factories and neglected streets. Aidan landed Silverwind on an old runway hidden among the ruins. Laura handed him the flash drive with the data, her hands trembling. "If we do this, they won't forgive us," she said. "They were never meant to," Aidan replied. "This isn't about them. It's about those who deserve the truth." They found Clark in the basement of an old warehouse where the smell of rust mingled with damp air. He was thin, with grey at his temples, but his eyes burned with resolve. Aidan handed him the flash drive, and Clark nodded. "This will change everything," he said, "but you know they'll come for you." "Let them come," Aidan replied. As they returned to the plane, the sky roared again. 3 Nexus Aero helicopters appeared on the horizon, their spotlights glaring like a dragon's eyes. Aidan and Laura leapt into the cockpit, and Silverwind took off as bullets tore into the ground around them. This time, Aidan didn't run. He pointed the plane straight at the enemy, his hands moving with lightning speed. Silverwind danced in the sky, dodging missiles with impossible precision. One helicopter exploded when Aidan lured it into a trap, crashing into an abandoned factory. The second lost control as Aidan dove sharply, forcing its pilot to panic. The third, however, was flown by a professional. "It's Crow," Laura whispered, her voice thick with fear. Aidan nodded. He knew. This was personal. He aimed Silverwind upward into clouds where lightning danced like living things. Crow's helicopter followed, but Aidan was faster. He pulled a loop, positioning the helicopter in front of him. In the moment their eyes met through the cockpit glass, Aidan pressed the trigger. A round from Silverwind's cannon tore through the helicopter, and it plummeted, burning like a meteor. When they landed back in Wind Hollow, the sky was quiet, but the storm in Aidan's heart still lingered. The data was in Clark's hands, and soon the truth about Nexus Aero would come to light. Laura looked at Aidan with a respect he hadn't seen in years. "You're not just a pilot," she said. "You're a legend." Aidan shook his head. I just kept a promise. That night, as he stood in the hangar holding William Reed's photo, an old mechanic from Windhollow approached. He handed Aidan a medal, the same one he'd left behind after Caratel. This is yours, the old man said. We all knew who you were. Aidan took the medal, but his eyes stayed on the plane. He hadn't come for glory. He had come for truth. Do you believe one person can change the world? Share if this story inspired you.